a beautiful world we live in, a sweet romantic place, beautiful people and...
Good afternoon from Nicky and from me from Castle Goring. We have quite a lot on our plate today, some serious, some rather less serious, hopefully entertaining. So without further ado, we will plunge right in. Quid pro quo says, "Wow, Lady C, did you watch the Earthshot Prize this evening?" So this is what you meant by behind the scenes. It is going to the USA next year. What are your thoughts about the project? Well, I actually think it is an excellent cause. I have grave reservations about some of the more extreme claims being made by some of the climate change advocates, because as any student of history knows, in the reign of Henry II, England was one of the chief wine-producing regions of France. Also, as any student of geography knows, the Sahara used to be green. So there is no doubt that climate change is not only a recent phenomenon, but that it is a natural phenomenon that takes place in various cycles and for various events, chief of which is volcanic eruptions. There are many other explanations, but I'm not going to go into all of that now. I'm simply laying my cards down on the table so that it's quite clear that what I say comes from a point of view of skepticism about the way the climate change issue has, to an extent, been hijacked so that the scientists of today are what the priests of 1,000 years ago were. You had sinful thoughts. It's thanks to you that the swarm of locusts come along every year and that they eat the crops, or some other nonsense. Misattributing natural events to human connected conduct. Having said that, there is no doubt that man has been injuring the planet, and we all live on this earth. There is no way that if somebody in China damages the environment, that somebody in London or Arkansas or Nebraska or Paris or Melbourne, Australia or New Zealand or Fiji or South America isn't ultimately going to suffer as well. Also, in my opinion, plastics have been a great invention, but one of the greatest damagers of the environment. So it doesn't really matter to what extent the scientists are right about some of the effects that man's conduct has upon the environment. What matters is that we can see with our own two eyes the damage that we have been doing in my lifetime to this planet. We are many people. I think, actually, having said that, it's quite possible that we can sustain an even larger percentage of people on this planet. If we are responsible and take care of the planet and of our conduct, I'm a great one, I have to tell you, for willful waste, woeful want. You know, there's very little in this castle that isn't somehow recycled or handed down. I am horrified by the culture of obsolescence, built-in obsolescence, the wastefulness. As some of you who have seen many of these shows will realize, I have clothes that are 30 and 40 years old, and I wear them. There's no need to throw out something just because it didn't cost a lot of money. As long as it's good and it looks good, there's no need to throw it out. We as a civilization are reaching a point where we are all going to have to agree that each of us has a part to play. We cannot have China, for instance, pumping fossil fuels into the environment irresponsibly, while other parts of the world are taking a more responsible attitude to things. Everybody is ultimately going to need to pull together. Also, as a civilization, because we live in a pretty global world, whether we like it or not, the internet, travel, these have shrunk the world, so it is now one world in a way it never used to be. We all need to understand and accept the fact that we are the products of a great success civilizationally. More people are better off than they have ever been throughout the history of humanity right now. Even with COVID, and even with the problems of COVID, as a civilization, the average person is significantly better off than they have ever been. Certainly when I was a child. As a taxi driver once said to me, he was from Cameroon, and he said, you know, I don't understand you British. He said, you're all busy complaining about the fact that you don't have enough of this and you don't have enough of that. He said, the poorest person in this country is regarded as if not rich, certainly very comfortably off in my country. I thought that was a very prescient comment for him to make. We need to understand that as a civilization, if we are going to continue to have ever-increasing prosperity, we are going to have to make sacrifices somewhere down the line. I think these sacrifices will ultimately be made willingly, and ultimately, once people are aware of the fact that they can actually pull together and that it's required, and with the developments that are being made at the moment, scientifically and technologically, I think we will all pull through to a golden age as long as it is not disrupted by irresponsible politicians and irresponsible media advocates. I mean, if you listen to some of the people who are commenting in the world today, you would think the world has never been worse off. And I'm now speaking about lifestyle-wise. Well, it's never been better off. Those are the absolute facts. In the meantime, there are things we can do and we should do. We should not waste. We should not throw away rubbish that we can save. Plastics we shouldn't be wasting. There are loads of little things that we can do and we should be doing and we should want to do. This isn't only for you and for me. This is for our children, our grandchildren, and for the planet. Yes, there are concerns that the ecological movement and climate change are being hijacked by politicians. But that aside, we all still need to do our bit. And I think that the Duke of Cambridge's Earthshot campaign is brilliant. 5 entities have been awarded £1 million each for their contribution to really what is the planet. And if I may, I will just read out what some of the winners were. The first of the 5 winners is the Republic of Costa Rica. Protect and restore nature. Now, Costa Rica and Jamaica have a long history together. Many Jamaicans 2 centuries ago and a century ago went to Costa Rica. There's a lot of back and forth between Costa Rica and Jamaica over the centuries. So, and Costa Rica, I've never been incidentally, but I know many people who have. And it is evidently the most wonderful, beautiful, magical place on earth. And they justly deserve the award because what they are doing is protecting and restoring nature. They have a rainforest, etc. It is evidently the most beautiful country. Clean our air is the second category, and that was won by Takachar in India. It is a discovery that for a relatively inexpensive thing, they get rid of agricultural waste and turn it into fertilizer. So instead of burning it, which actually does not help the environment, what they do is they turn the agricultural waste into fertilizer. 90% savings in terms of burning the waste. Wonderful discovery. The next one is equally good. Revive Our Oceans category winner is Coral Vita in the Bahamas. Winner of the Revive Our Oceans category was Coral Vita in the Bahamas. Founded by Sam, Taisha, and the splendidly named Gator Halpern. Isn't that the most wonderful name? He's a gator, like an alligator. Isn't it heavenly? I think it's just the most divine name, especially for somebody who's involved with the seas. Anyway, they came up with a formula for growing coral quickly. And they hope to ultimately be able to grow sufficient coral that all the reefs in the world will be regenerated because they're dying. And our seas cannot survive properly without the coral reefs. So that, I think, is another wonderful, and another one which is also incredible. I mean, you know, the science and the technology and the discoveries that these people have come up with are just wonderful. Build a waste-free world has been won by the city of Milan's food waste hubs, where 1/3 of all the food in the world goes to waste, which I think is an abomination. I mean, I have to say, I hate wasting food. Having said that, last week I took the decision that instead of swallowing things on principle, I'm now going to tuck them to one side because I've been gaining too much weight. Putting that aside, there is no doubt that not only do human beings privately waste food, but that there's tremendous wastage at the supermarkets and at companies. Well, the city of Milan has come up with a scheme whereby they create hubs that collect the food and hand it on through NGOs to their needy citizens. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, why should people be in need when other people are standing by and wasting and something can be done about it? I think initiatives like this should be encouraged, and I'm glad to see that they were also given an award. Now, the last category was Fix Our Climate winner. That was won by AEM Electrolyzer. It's technology that was developed by Inapta to turn renewable electricity into emission-free hydrogen gas. Wonderful, wonderful. It is hoped that ultimately a lot of our vehicles and stuff that needs to be fed energy will be fed with hydrogen gas. So I think it's a wonderful thing that the Duke of Cambridge has come up with. I thought he and Catherine looked great. I mean, I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed, she's come up with a new way of appearing in public. She doesn't have a handbag. Of course, she has a lady-in-waiting, so the lady-in-waiting will doubtless be carrying the handbag for her. But isn't it interesting that she arrives so she has her hands free and she's not clutching a bag? Interesting, no? I'm not sure actually I approve. I've got to say, I think a woman needs her handbag. So, putting that aside, I thought she looked wonderful. I thought Prince William looked great. I mean, it's a slightly cutting edge initiative. And, you know, I thought he looked very debonair and very low-key debonair. And I'll tell you what's also very interesting. Until very recently, really in the last few years, no gentleman wore a velvet jacket except at home. They were called smoking jackets, and you were supposed to wear them only at your own house. In the last maybe decade and a half, on country house weekends, men very often now wear a smoking jacket without a tie, and that's become something, and I notice it's now filtered through because my children have worn smoking jackets to balls. And I did make the point to them the first time that they put them on. I said, you know, strictly speaking, this is pushing the boundaries, but let's push the boundaries. And I thought William and Catherine looked great, and I thought that they wowed everybody, and I couldn't back this initiative more. And as I say, I back it notwithstanding the fact that I have reservations about the way the climate change issue has been, to an extent, polluted. Surprise, surprise there, of course, by politicians and scientists. Because let's not forget, people like power. Most people like power. Give them a little power and they're not going to get rid of it if they don't have to. Personally, I think power is something I wouldn't want. I remember my therapist Basil saying, relationships that are built on power are doomed to failure. And also, I don't understand how anybody would choose to want to tell other people how to govern their lives. So I'm clearly not political material, which is good because we also need skeptics in this world. Lorena Toft says, Dear Lady C, I think authenticity does slap Meghan Markle on a daily basis every time she looks at Catherine. The Duchess of Cambridge is the real deal, don't you think? Yes, I do think. You know, there's no very easy way of faking sincerity when you're on the global stage. I don't think it's really possible to do it. I think you can do it one-to-one, and phonies are very good at faking sincerity, and when you get to know them well, you get to see through them. And sadly, that, I think, is the problem that Meghan has. Because Meghan is not, for all of her use of the word authentic, she's not authentic. She's a pastiche. While Catherine is the real McCoy, which is ironic because although they're both from middle-class backgrounds, Meghan is not from what we would say was an establishment upper middle-class background, while Catherine actually is, on her father's side, from an upper middle-class background. But let's remember, her grandmother also lived in a council house, so she has roots in the working class, which is good because she shows if you are true, if you are educated, if your family has ambition and they are prepared to work, which they were, nobody gave them anything, they created it themselves, you will achieve, and your children will be given every opportunity. And if they grasp those opportunities, they can flourish, not by pretentiousness and insincerity, but by being solid and true. You don't have to be an aristocrat to be a true lady, but you do have to be noble to be a true lady. Nobility of spirit. And that's what Catherine has. And that's what Meghan, for all her pretensions and claims to the contrary, lacks. And people sense it. Linda B says, Dear Lady C, what if Harry remarries? Would Megs keep her Duchess title in that scenario? Love your channel, Linda from Australia. Love, 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 love Australians, I've got to tell you. Some of my dearest friends are Australian. I just have such a warm place in my heart for Australians. Thank you for that as well. If Harry marries and he and Meghan get divorced, because we need to remember they'd have to get divorced first, she would be Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, until she remarried, and his wife would be Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. At one stage, when I was younger, there were either 5 or 6 Countesses of Kimberley and 3 Duchesses of Argyll. We won't go into the Kimberleys, although I knew Johnny Kimberley very slightly. I think he was married 6 times. So I think there were 6 ex or present Countesses of Kimberley, but there were certainly 3 Duchesses of Argyll. There was my sister-in-law, Iona, who at the time was the then Duchess of Argyll, so she was the Duchess of Argyll. There was Margaret, my father-in-law's ex-wife. She was Margaret, Duchess of Argyll. When she and Big Ian got married, there was another Duchess of Argyll called Wee Wee, who was my ex-husband and his brother's mother. And she was Louise, Duchess of Argyll, but she then got married and became Mrs. Bob Timpson. And then after Margaret and Big Ian got divorced, there was Matilda. And when Big Ian died, Matilda was Matilda, Duchess of Argyll. She wanted to call herself the Dowager Duchess of Argyll. But my brother-in-law, who was really a deeply unpleasant person, objected to her calling herself the Dowager Duchess of Argyll because he said she wasn't his mother and that she was to call herself Matilda, Duchess of Argyll, which she did. In fact, the Dowager is the relict of the previous title holder. Small example. When Henry VIII divorced Catherine of Aragon, he referred to her thereafter as the Dowager Princess of Wales, because her first husband had been his brother Arthur, who had died. So Dowager doesn't even necessarily mean that there is another title holder around, because there was no other Princess of Wales at the time. I just make that point for what it's worth, to show up that rotter little Ian. Go Cat Go says, what happens to the wife's title if the former husband remarries? Well, we've covered that. She keeps her title until she remarries. That's just the way it is. Yami Massa says, Lady C, if the titles are put into abeyance and they divorce, she wouldn't be entitled to use it, right? Good point. She would not be entitled to use it, which is why I would encourage all of you to sign the petition. The petition, admittedly, has stalled because possibly I have not been bringing it to everybody's attention as much as I ought to have been doing. But I hate being pushy. And, I hate jumping on bandwagons and beating drums. So, but I think this is an opportune moment to say, if Harry's title is put into abeyance, Meghan becomes Mrs. Mountbatten Windsor. And when they get divorced, if they get divorced, she becomes Mrs. Meghan Mountbatten Windsor. Finito. She does not become Princess Henry of Wales if his titles are put into abeyance. His titles, mark you, not just the peerage. She asks a second part to the question. She's nice compliment first, which I think I will actually read out because I really think it says that I'm succeeding in my objective. She says, Lady C, I love your unique and informative videos. Thank you. My question is this. Since Harry is now directly involved in a moneyed venture, and if there should be some alleged fiduciary naughtiness and a lawsuit ensues against all principals, can the royal family be dragged into the lawsuit? No, they can't. Harry is, and now he has, to quote him, he stepped away from being a senior royal. He was deprived of his right to use His Royal Highness style. If something untoward should happen, God forbid, and I mentioned this in my book, and I mentioned that this was a great fear of people at the palace, that Meghan might involve Harry in commercial enterprises which could result in serious problems for them. Well, there is a precedent to what happens. The Infanta Cristina of Spain, who is King Felipe of Spain's sister, she and her husband were charged with financial irregularities. They were stripped of the dukedom of Palma de Mallorca. He went to prison. He's still in prison. Nothing to do with the Spanish royal family. They are effectively outcasts. Could it happen here? Would it happen here? Hopefully it wouldn't. Hopefully it wouldn't. However, if it does, what can I tell you? If it does, in life sometimes you have to accept the consequences of your actions. Randall says, since Meghan and Harry are champions of a clean environment, should they not be flying on any planes across the US? Why aren't they setting a better example? There are daily transcontinental trains. They can book a sleeping car compartment and leave a minimal carbon footprint. Excellent observation. Excellent observation. I think it's one that the press should be making. Harry and Meghan have options. They could fly commercial, but they're too grand and too famous. Prince William is not too famous. Prince Charles, the Queen, they've all flown commercial. They're not too famous, but Harry and Meghan, they're too famous. Well, they could be in a relatively discreet train across America. Low carbon footprint. I think it's a brilliant idea, and I would recommend that you suggest it to them. I'm going to suggest it to them on your behalf now, and you could always write to them in their palace in Montecito and point out that they should be putting their money where their mouth is, figuratively speaking. The dislike of pigeons. Lady C, you are absolutely fabulous. Thank you. Sorry, I shouldn't have read that part out, but anyway. I know it's off topic, but once you mentioned that Joan Rivers was one of the best interviewers. Could you talk about her? I absolutely loved her. Again, thank you for being you. Oh, thank you. That's sweet of you. Well, I didn't really know Joan Rivers well. I met her a few times. I was interviewed by her a few times as well, and I met her socially a few times. She was great. She was great friends of mine, and more than one friend of mine. So I have a picture of her from disparate sources. She was an impeccable lady. You know, that raunchy character that you saw on stage was not what she was like off stage, but she was a wonderfully entertaining person, great sense of humor, great style, very correct, and very much a lady. I have to say, I think she was one of the great comedians of all time. From time to time, I look at her shows and they crack me up. She was so funny and so outrageous. Wonderful. Erin Maguire says, Evening Lady C, I love listening to exquisite commentary. I'm interested in your thoughts. Firstly, do you think that Hasbin and Meghan wanted Lilibet's christening as part of their Netflix series? And secondly, showcasing Lilibet's first photos during their Netflix series? Meghan is the merch queen, and this would potentially be a huge ratings bonanza. Erin. Well, you know, Meghan and Harry have really got, really it's actually Meghan. Meghan has got herself trapped in a situation to a large extent of her own making. The problem with being a diva and being a grandstander and assuming postures or attitudinizing, as I used to say to my parents because they were great ones for attitudinizing, is you end up backing yourself into a corner where sometimes the unforeseen consequences, it's not so easy to reconcile them with your other objectives. And she has to protect the core of her personality. And there is little doubt in my mind that Meghan has a serious personality disorder. I'm not a doctor. I could be doing her a grave injustice. But in my opinion, she is a classical, fully blown narcissist with antisocial aspects and deeply manipulative. And the problem with people like that is they assume postures and then they find it very difficult to get out of those postures. Now, it is possible that they have decided that they want their children to be ordinary. Well, why did they want them to be a prince and princess if they want them to be ordinary? I mean, that's one anomaly that springs to mind right there. Another would be children need to be brought up for the world they are going to occupy from they are babies. My mother used to say to us, and she was absolutely right, don't baby talk to children. You don't want them to grow up to be stupid. Speak to a child as if it has intelligence, and even if it doesn't understand everything, it will hopefully get the gist or the flavour, and down the line it will understand. And if you speak baby talk and nonsense to children, you're simply bringing them up to be stupid. I have to say I agree with that. She also emphasised with us, and I certainly did it with my children, as did other of my relations. The children are brought up from their babies to be civilised and well behaved and to have good manners. You don't start to teach a child at the age of 14 what it should be learning at 14 months. It needs to have it under its belt before it needs to deploy the skills. It needs to be exposed to the skills that it will need to utilise down the line. Bringing children up in too isolated a fashion is always bad. Bringing children up to be too special is always bad. Children need to understand before they can properly understand that if they occupy positions of privilege, they are lucky. They're not special. They're lucky. And with every single privilege goes a commensurate responsibility. Bringing royal children up in California as it's deprivation. I'm sorry. The children are deprived of the environment that they should actually be a part of. They're being deprived of their family, their extended family. And extended family is very important. The main reason why I started speaking to my mother after 20 years of estrangement was because of my children. Because I understood that my children needed grandparents. All children need extended family. And I was a single mother. Meghan is not a single mother. I make the point for what it's worth. I think they're making grave mistakes. I think they're absolutely making grave mistakes. In terms of showcasing the children, will they do it for the Netflix program? The problem with people who are pretentious and manipulative is it's always one act after the other. And you really don't know what is coming out of left field next. But you do know it's going to be pretentious and it's going to be ridiculous and it's going to be boring, because ultimately people like that are quite predictable. Within the variety is a tiresome sameness. I also don't think that Harry and Meghan are of sufficient interest, or people care about them enough. I think their story is of interest. I think their antics are of interest. But they personally are not so much of interest. You know, it doesn't matter who's in the car that's about to crash. What matters is that a human being is in the car and it's gonna crash. That's what people find fascinating. Not that it's a blonde or it's a brunette or it's somebody special or somebody not special. It's that it is a human being. We relate on a human level to atavistic things. They are confusing atavism with interest in themselves. I think they have lost so much sympathy from so many people that people really don't like them. I think that they have their supporters, but everybody else is so turned off them. Really, people are interested in seeing how and when and where and why and how the car is going to crash and what's going to happen to the people in it. Harry and Meghan have lost the affection and respect of a vast percentage of their former supporters. By depriving us, in quotes, of pictures of their children, the children are complete strangers to the public. The public can't have affection for people they have not even seen a picture of. They're just ideas. They're not even actualities in terms of public figures. Why would people care? So if this is their game plan, I think it's going to rebound very adversely because people like people they like. They're not interested in being manipulated and drip-fed or pap about their public figures. And they make up their minds whether they like you or not. It's as simple as that. How can they like people they don't ever get to know? And believe me, when you're in the public eye, unless you are an ace phony of the highest order and a very good actor and actress with it, people see through you, as they've seen through Harry and Meghan. So I think the whole thing is an ill-conceived notion. Yet another one of their too clever by half and stupid by whole ploys. Maria Papadelli says, Lady C, could the next king take a title away from someone? Well, the next king can't take a peerage away from a pair, but the next king can certainly take princely rank away from those who possess it. Simply done, order in council, stroke of the pen. George V did it. It can be done. Prince Alistair of Connaught springs to mind. He was the son of Prince and Princess Arthur of Connaught. His grandfather was the Duke of Connaught, who was one of Queen Victoria's sons. If I remember correctly, he was the youngest son. Prince Alistair of Connaught ceased to be His Highness Prince Alistair of Connaught at the stroke of King George V's pen in 1917 and became Alistair, Earl of Macduff. And when his grandfather died, he became the next Duke of Connaught. No royal status. That's how these things can work and do work. Rosie says, in the papers this morning, the Queen has stated that she finds people who talk about climate change but actually don't do anything about it irritating. I wonder if she has anyone in particular in mind. Naughty Queenie. I'm sure she had more than one person in mind. And I'm sure that she made the point because she feels that it is unacceptable for people to preach and not practice. That's what all authentic people feel. Authentic. We're authentic. We do feel that if you are going to preach, you should practice. And I'm sure she wasn't limiting her comments to only the people you're thinking of. I'm sure she was limiting her comments to people you haven't thought of. But I'm not going to suggest who they were because I don't want to cause mischief. Rachel James says, Dear Lady C, I have a question if it's not too late to ask. What do you think about Prince Charles's comments about sympathising with Insulate Britain and Prince William's comments about the space expedition? For me personally, it has made me lose more respect for them, and they are clearly not learning from Harry's mistakes. It makes them appear out of touch with the public who are struggling with real problems like paying their bills and helping their children have happy childhoods. Well, Rachel James, I get what you're saying, but I don't think what they were saying is actually connected directly to the fact that people are having problems. Because I think, yes, Prince William's comment actually was, why waste all that money for billionaires to go into space and movie stars to go into space when that money could be better spent right here on Earth? So, in fact, Prince William's comment was actually very much directed at people who have a great deal of money wasting the money. I actually think Prince William was morally right, and I also think he was impertinent, and I'll tell you why. If a billionaire has made his money, it's his right to spend it how he pleases, as long as he is not going to be breaking the law. If he's not doing people harm, he has a right to spend his money, even if he's not doing as much good for as many people as he could otherwise be doing. I mean, this comes down to the fact that privileges have responsibilities, but they also have rights. And if somebody has made billions, we have a right to not respect them if they fritter their money away on useless enterprises. But I don't think it's in the place of any prince or political appointee or politician or world leader to articulate condemnation of them, because it's not in the place of Prince William or any other person who occupies a political role, and he does occupy a political role. It's maybe not party political, but he is a part of the body politic. And it's really not in his place to be lecturing billionaires if they wish to squander their money, and certainly not doing it publicly. If he wanted to do it privately, that's another matter. As for Prince Charles's comments about sympathising with Insulate Britain, again, I thought this was ill-advised. Insulate Britain are irresponsible and driving the police and the public crazy with their unacceptable against the law protests. It's not the place of the Prince of Wales to articulate any sympathy whatsoever for these people. He needs to understand there are times when he needs to shut up, and that was one of them. It's totally out of place. It's completely unacceptable for the Prince of Wales to be saying that he sympathises with them in any way, shape or form. It's just not acceptable. Jake Hanley says, "Dear Lady C, despite not agreeing with you on your tattoo stance, I of course remain a loyal follower. What do you make of the state of affairs in this country where now, disregarding political affiliation, 2 MPs on the right and left have been murdered? Where is this society heading in a time where political polarisation has reached the level of murder? Thanks as always, a tattooed follower." Well, Jake Hanley, enjoy your tattoos. It's your right. I don't personally like tattoos, but if you do, you have an absolute right to them, and I wish you well with them. I think your question is a wonderful question. I think there is less polarisation in Britain than there is in the United States. I think that by and large, we are being more centrist. We are less rattled with controversy and point scoring, which I think is a very good thing. The murderers of Joe Cox, the Labour MP in 2016, and now Sir David Amess, the Conservative MP for Leigh-on-Sea in Essex, who was killed in his surgery. And he was in a church, can you imagine? And he's stabbed by this fundamentalist who has been radicalized. I mean, there's no excuse. 17 times the man stabbed him. 17 times. I have to say, in my opinion, people who commit crimes like that should be executed. I never used to be in favour of the death penalty, and by and large I'm not. Indeed, when my grandfather's murderer was going to hang, I proposed writing to the Governor-General asking for him to exercise clemency. And my grandmother said to me, "Buddy Buds, you can't do that." She said if it got out into the newspapers, it would create a hue and cry. She said he knew he was going to hang. He confessed despite knowing he would hang, because my grandmother was in court when all of this happened. When he confessed, and the judge actually pointed out to him that if he continued with his confession, he would hang. And the judge even ordered Dr. Cook, who was the chief psychiatrist at Bellevue, which was the insane asylum at the time, to check to see that he was not insane. And I thought that he shouldn't hang. But in a situation like this, where somebody is radicalized, I think he should be dispatched to meet his maker. I'm sure that's not going to be a popular position for me to take with everybody, but I have noticed that society is becoming a lot more splintered than it ought to be. And crimes of terror of this nature should always be met with swift and permanent justice. The alternative opens up a whole can of worms in terms of justice and how expensive it is to keep a 25-year-old murderer for the rest of his life. Sorry. Their philosophy is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Let them pay with their lives. I don't think that crime has anything to do with the polarisation of politics in this country. I think it's to do with the radicalization of people who hold unacceptable religious beliefs. Because make no mistake about it, the Muslim religion is also a Judeo-Christian Mohammedan religion. Its roots are in Judaism. Christ is a prophet of Islam, and the 10 Commandments apply in Islam, as do the dietary laws. Hence why Muslims don't eat pork. Thou shalt not kill. He knew it was a crime and he committed the crime. I think he should pay the price. And it's got nothing to do with politics. It's to do with radicalization. It's to do with religion and culture. You know, we live in a secular civilization where religion does not play the overriding part that it used to play. People like that murderer have no respect for our freedoms. They want to deprive us of those freedoms. He's made a point. I think he should pay the price. And on that note, I will say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and please keep the questions and comments coming in. I know I say it all the time, but I mean it, and it's really important to say. This couldn't be done without your input. Also, I'll end on the note of saying those who haven't signed the petition, please do so. We need sufficient numbers for this to have feet, for Harry to voluntarily require the Queen to put his titles into abeyance. God bless. Bye-bye.